Hey everyone, welcome to a special Tuesday lesson. I'm glad you all could make it out. I know we had to change the schedule a little bit, so we are doing these a little bit early. This is a cool lesson that I've got planned here. It's going to be sort of an improv little walkthrough that I'm going to do of some of my favorite chords, some of my favorite chords, and how I visualize them, and how just by kind of vamping on one, maybe two chords, you can create a really cool atmosphere with just, you know, simple triads, simple major and minor chords, and then we're going to look at suspended chords as well, and even a little flat 5 chord. So, as always, if you got questions, just leave them in the chat, and I will happily answer on stream. Okay, so before this lesson, I was just playing this progression here. I was playing C, everyone's favorite first chord, and then I was popping up to F, and then I wanted to deviate a little bit from what's expected. You know, if you've tuned into any of these lessons, you spent plenty of time bopping back and forth from C to F, and you know, maybe your next chord's going to be G, you would expect, but actually I'm going to do a little tiny shape change to this F chord. I'm going to take this F note and move it up just one semitone. So now I'm playing this kind of cool, it's like a, it's sort of like a diminished chord. So I'm playing F, or sorry, I'm playing C, F sharp, and A. So I'm going from my C chord, C, E, G, to my F chord, to this cool change, and then I'm going to land on my G chord, so D, G, and B. So that's just my simple little progression, and I'm using that little semitone jump right there to kind of lead the chords up to that G. It's sort of an ear training exercise for you to just listen to how this makes you feel as you're moving. It's kind of this, there's that tension in that second to last chord. So if I'm wanting to improvise over stuff like this, it's a simple process. You can do it before you even get into all this crazy jazz world by just messing around sort of with like the broken chord version shapes of what you're doing in the left hand, right? So take your just 3 notes of your C triad, and you know, again, just treat your left hand as your drum. I'm just playing solid to keep it nice and simple. Now I'm in my F chord. So now I've just made sure that I'm going to reflect this chord change by moving my F note up 1 semitone. Now I'm on my G chord. Back to your 1. It's always a good idea to set some rules as you're improvising, because that way you don't just fall off the total deep end. So in this case, my rules are just to work totally within the triad notes. And this so that's a simple exercise that you can kind of use, and you can take it wherever direction you want to go, and you can add in whatever chords that you want to add in as well. You know, I kind of made that into a major sounding jam because I'm just basing it all off of my my C major kind of framework, right? But maybe I want to bring it down to A minor. So I could continue this little walk through these chords. Now here comes that diminished chord. Now I go to the G. Now I want to make a vibe shift, so I'm going to go to my A minor chord instead of my C. That'll be the only change I make, but because it's the first chord in my progression, it dictates how the other chords sound in relation to the first one. So now I'm kind of playing in a different kind of world. Because I'm starting with that A minor chord instead of the C major. So you can start off nice and simple, working with kind of one major color. Then you can start to add in some other colors. It's like if you're painting a picture and you want to mix your paints together to make different colors. You know, you start off with like your primary ones, so you could kind of see your C, your F, and your G chords. Those are like your primary colors. And then you want to, you know, add in some different kind of interesting tones and just sort of experiment. And it's sort of a like a trial and error kind of thing. There's all sorts of opportunity to, you know, just see what happens if you add in like a weird little flat note rather than just doing your regular C, E, G chord or something. Another one of my favorite chords that I like to mess around with is the 4 chord. So if I'm just playing that progression again, remember in the first iteration of this, I was playing my 4 chord as F major. But with a very simple little adjustment, I can make this into a whole other beast by flattening my A note. And now all of a sudden you have a little change in your hands, but it's like a big color change. So you're going from an F major chord to an F minor chord. So that, let's try that out. Let's try out this new progression. So I'm going to go from my C chord. Now I'm going to go to my F chord. And now instead of that diminished chord, I'm going to go to the F minor. Here it comes right here. See? Different path. Now to the G. Totally different vibe. Now we can go back to that C chord. Things brighten up again. So there's that familiar triad. To the F. To that F minor. To that G chord. To the F. To the minor. So remember that A flat. To the G. And again, if we want to darken it, instead of going back to our C chord, we can go to that A minor chord. To the F. To the F minor. To the G major. Okay, so all we did was substitute a couple changes, and we had like two totally different style of jams that we were making. Remember, in the first version that we walked through, we started with the C chord, then we moved to the F chord, then we moved our F note up a semitone to make that diminished sound, and then we moved up to the G chord, and then we landed back on the 1. And if we wanted to darken that, instead of landing back on the 1, that C major chord, we could land back on the A minor. And you have a totally different resolution. So that was the first one. The second one that we did was C major to F. And now we flattened our top note. We flattened that A to an A flat to make that minor instead of a major chord. And then we went up to our G, back to our C. And then again, to darken that, play C, play F, play F minor, play G, and then land on A minor. All right. Let's see if we got any questions here. Hey, Papa Bear, I don't think I've seen you on stream before, so welcome. If this is your first lesson, it's awesome to have you. Really, really cool to see new people out. Let's take a look here. Got a question from Jacob H. He says, when improvising, do rhythms and patterns just come with times, or are there any that kind of work universally? That's a good question. I mean, obviously, just pounding out your chords as solid will work regardless of the time signature, because it's not really a pattern. It's just you're just keeping time with it. However, if you are playing like a broken pattern, like say if I've been doing those exercises with broken chords, I would have to be considering how many notes are in that pattern before that loop resets if I wanted to stay in 4/4 time. So I was doing all these exercises with a 4-bar kind of, or with a 4-beat count, right? I was going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm changing to my F chord. So I'm just using this as a static claw. However, if I wanted to make that into a broken thing, I'd have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So bottom, middle, top, middle, bottom, middle, top, middle, bottom, middle, top, middle, right? So that's a simple pattern to use with your 3-note chords, is you just sort of you kind of make a little like an up and down little thing, and that'll naturally reset in 4 bars. However, there are other ways to do it. Sometimes I like to play with a big open arpeggio, like a full chord like this. So I got a C chord here, C, E, G, and then I got a C on top. And I can just roll it back and forth. And if I play it within a click, so if I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, hold on. Yeah. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, change to the F. Change to that diminish. Change to that G. So now it sort of becomes a more flowy pattern versus just the solid. Right? So that's a really simple couple kind of ways you can A and B some stuff in your left hand. Got a question from Elliot Landeros. He says, are you changing the scale and the melody? I'm actually, the only thing that I'm doing in that jam there was when I got to this chord here where I have that F sharp, is I'm just making sure to play that F sharp in my little melody. But generally speaking, I'm playing C major scale in all those chords. Of course, if you want to make a melody that reflects the chord changes nice and well that are happening in the left hand, it's always good to be incorporating the tones within that chord progression, like the chord that you're on. So that's why starting off with an exercise where you're just playing the 3 notes in your triad. And it gives you a limited window to improvise with, and you start making these kind of nursery rhyme sounding things, but it's really good to help orient your ear and just kind of ground your playing in with some intention. But yeah, the only note that I'm changing is putting that F sharp in on my 3rd chord. And then of course in the second example, when I go to the F minor, I'm going to be playing the A flat instead of the A natural. So I hope that makes a bit of sense. Okay. Okay, so yeah, okay. Jeff from South Australia, you're making a comment that in some music the left hand only plays the root note or the 1 note and the 5, so kind of frames out the chord, while the right hand handles all of the other aspects of the chord, and that's totally true, and that's another really useful thing for improvising as well, because it sort of frees up both what your hands can do, but it also frees up the sound too. It's like if I'm playing, especially if I'm playing down low, like this sounds really muddy if I play the full chord, right? And that's just because that's just the way sound works physically. If notes down low sound really muddy and close together. So if I just open that up by playing just the C and the G, then I can add my color in the top notes, right? So, yeah, that's something that's really useful as well. It's also useful if you are just using your left hand as your rhythm engine, because then you have this. Sometimes I like to just improvise just with those open fifths, because it gives you just kind of it's like a little tick-tock kind of motion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Gives you all sorts of room to explore. It's kind of like the most open-ended accompaniment you can give yourself. And it's amazing what different notes will change the vibe of what you're doing down here. All of a sudden it's got a totally different characteristic, even though all I'm doing is the same thing the left hand. Now I've switched to my 4 chord, but all I'm doing in the left hand is playing that open 5th. So it gives me an opportunity to choose to either go major and make it this bright little, walk in the park, or I can go darker and do minor. And now it sounds a lot moodier. Now you go back to your 1 chord. And the same thing. All your musical emotions and shapes that you can make, they all boil down to the thirds. If you want your music to sound, this is a simplification, I'm sure some people might take issue with it, but your thirds are going to determine whether you're playing a major chord, happy, or a minor chord. So small little semitone adjustments like that, they seem, it's crazy because it's so subtle, but it'll really change the game. Okay. Do you have any method or tips to learn faster the chord progressions in chords? From Cherry BRNB. Sure. So there's common chord progressions that you should learn in every key. That's the 1, 4, 5. So that's what this lesson is derived off of. C is our 1 chord. F is our 4 chord. And G is our 5 chord. So notice how I'm using chord inversions, they're called. It's when you restack the notes that make up each of those chords so that they're easier to play. If I didn't know chord inversions, I would have to I'd have to play my C chord like this, and then I got to jump all the way up here to play my 4 chord, and then I got to jump up. So it becomes this kind of bouncing around the piano. But because I'm using chord inversions, I can take my C chord and use this root position. So I got all my notes here, and then my 4 chord contains all the notes that make up F major, but I've just stacked them so that they're kind of closer nearby. And then same thing with my G chord. So if you want to learn how to do chord progressions and get fast with them, learn all the inversions of every chord that you know. So go up and down the piano with each of your chords just like that. And you want to get to a point where you are able to, you just instinctively know how far apart your triads are. Because then you're not thinking about it as you're playing. And another tip that I could give you is something that works for me, maybe this will work for you, is improvise with your chords in different inversions. So if you just explore your C major chord in root position, that's got a different vibe than exploring it up here. So you're training not only your hands to feel how these chords change, but you're also you're training your ear. To recognize how the chord inversions sound too. So I hope that helps you out. Adityo Priyandanap. Apologies for that pronunciation. Why is there a B flat when you change to the F minor chord? So in that progression, the second example that I gave you, where I'm swapping, where I'm flattening this note down, this is one scenario where it's sort of a personal choice. But when I'm playing this F minor chord, it would be the one scenario in this improvisation where I'm starting to think in F minor versus C major. And F minor simply has B flat in it. So that's the logic behind that thinking. All right. Let's see here. Okay, Freddie Fredster says, would you elaborate a bit more about the usage of the third to modify the tone or flavor of things? Sure. So if I just play this as an open fifth, if I don't have any third in the middle of these two notes, it sort of sounds like an empty. Think of it as an empty cup, and you don't really know what's inside it until you put a third in it. So this sort of sounds spacey and open, and if I put a major third, then you have a major triad. But if I go back to this open fifth and play a minor third, it changes your it just changes how you listen to it. It changes your whole ear. So there's a couple ways I could tackle explaining that. I guess if you compare a major scale to a minor scale, you can notice that the third note in the scale is the first time where you can tell whether or not the scale is major or minor. So if I play C major, you know, oh, now I'm major. Whereas if I play C minor, now I have, like that's an immediate tell that I'm now working within the minor key. So a good way to get your ear behind all that stuff is just to practice flattening your thirds and unflattening them to experiment with your major and minor triads. So yeah, that's kind of the way I would consider this sort of thing to work. Question from Jason Zhang: how do you write your progressions from the start, like a song melody, or writing a piano cover for it? Usually I start off really simple. If I want to write a song, I'll just start off with like 2 chords and experiment with those 2 chords. And then writing chord progressions for a melody, in other words. Yeah. So if you have, I mean, it depends how you work. Typically, I work with the chord progression first, and then I put a melody on top of it. But if you have a melody, I don't know. So you have 2 notes. Those 4 notes all exist kind of within this F major chord. I have an F, an A, and then I play D, and then I play C. So I could recognize that my first 2 notes in this melody naturally fall within the F major triad. And I have a D on top. After that, there's a couple ways I could go with that. I think about what are the chords that work within F major that have a D in it. So there's a couple chords that have a D in it. There's the 4 chord, which is B flat. So now I can go that route to make a chord for that part of the melody, or I could go and play a D minor chord. So it's got a different vibe. I can play a G minor chord. So that's the kind of way that you could try if you have a melody that you want to make some chords on, and then just experiment. And maybe you could even you could write an entire song with just that melody. And all you have to do is change the chord progression underneath it. Try it with a G minor. Whatever you want to do. So I really think it comes down to just exploring and seeing what sort of works with you. Okay, how do I improve upon just playing chords without any harmony? From Alexia Martinez. How do I improve upon just playing chords without any harmony? Not quite sure what you are referring to there, because when I think of chords, I think of harmony. But if you're thinking about like just the physical act of getting used to playing chords, like just one chord, that comes down to solid, all your inversions, and broken. So practice your chords in those two forms, and you'll get way better at chords in no time. Joshua Idodi, what do you use to play independently in both hands and increase flexibility in both hands? Well, playing with a metronome is huge for having rhythm, just kind of getting that ingrained in you. But earlier on in this lesson, I demonstrated a couple different left-hand patterns. So I had this one, and then I had this one. And I just drill that kind of stuff over and over again in the left hand. Typically, if you're anything like me, if you're anything like 99% of piano players, your left hand's going to be weaker than your right, and that's totally normal. That's like, you know, just the way it is. But a way to kind of start to think about both hands together is to play like this, where you're focusing on your left hand, but every time you reset your loop in your left hand, just play a note in your right, and that's going to start to sync up your hands together. And you just start really simple like this, and then gradually you can play two notes. Play three notes, then you can play four, because you'll learn to just subdivide within that loop. That's what worked for me. It's a slow but steady progression. Jeff from South Australia says, Improv, do you work between the major to the relative minor, C to A minor, or do you choose a different minor scale to the major scale? That depends on the kind of sound that you're looking for. The benefit, obviously, of going from C to A minor is you are using the same scale. They both work with using just the white keys. Let me just make sure I understand your question here. Or do you choose a different minor scale to the major scale? Yeah, so if I were to, I could try making a song where I'm going from C major to E minor. So instead of going down to play A minor, I'm going to go up to play E minor. And E minor has a different key signature. It has that F sharp in it. So if I were to play a song or improvise with those two chords, I would make sure to play that F sharp. And that has a totally different characteristic, right? So I hope that makes some sense. Jamie Cameron, he says, do you have any tips for modulating between keys while improvising? Yeah, so generally speaking, if you like, an easy key change that you could make is to just go up to your 4 chord and actually use that as your new key. So I can be playing along in C. I'm going to combine these two questions here because we got one from Philip Sneglerov, and he says, can you play something for rock like Improv? So I'm going to do it like a blues thing. So I'm in C major here, or C blues, and when I get to my F chord, I can either stay in that scale, stay playing in C world, or I can move up to play in the F blues. And then back to my C chord. And that same thing, you know, you could take that same logic and work with the major chords, or work with the minor chords rather. So now I'm in F, getting all turned around here. Now I'm in C minor. So I'm playing a C minor 7. Now I'm going to move to F minor 7, and I'm going to change my key to F minor. So now I'm at F minor. Back to C minor. If I want to go to my 5 chord, I can change key again, play in G minor to F minor, back to C major. So that's something that you could do to get into key modulation. Okay, well that's about all the time I have for this lesson. But thanks so much for all the great questions. If anyone has any more, let me know. So just to recap, we had kind of 2 progressions that we worked with, and we just thought about the shapes and we thought about the sounds of them. So going right back to the beginning of this lesson, we had that C major to F major to that diminished, to the G chord, and then we had the second version of that, which same first 2 chords, but now the 3rd chord flattens out to an F minor, up to the G major, and then if we wanted to make those progressions sound darker, we substituted our 1 chord for the minor chord, A minor, and then we had that same loop. And then we had some other stuff as well. All right, so that's it for this lesson. Thank you so much for coming out. For members, we have a lesson tomorrow, Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to be teaching some stuff on using different registers of the piano to change how you play. So we're going to be playing stuff up high, kind of like twinkle notes, then down low with big thunderous bass notes. So I hope you can join me for that. If you're not a member of Pianote, check us out and sign up because we got tons of awesome stuff. And I'm just going to do a kind of a bluesy version of these 2 progressions out. So thanks so much for joining me.